Hello, everyone. My name is Michael McCormick, and you are listening to the Superintendent Hot Seat, where bold superintendent leaders share the real stories behind their most difficult challenges and decisions as they work to improve student safety, wellness, and attendance in a system that is not yet fully prepared to support those entering our schools. The purpose of this podcast is to engage the nation's top K-12 leaders in meaningful discussions on addressing the growing issues of anxiety, depression, bullying, and violence among students, which can greatly affect their ability to learn and feel safe coming to school, as well as teachers' capacity to teach effectively. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by our guest, Sarah Stone, Superintendent of Albany School District. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. And so here's the big question. If you had to rethink student wellness in your district, whether it's student anxiety, depression, bullying, or violence, what are some of the ways you've approached this work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think from like a human level, I always come at any of my work as a mom first. And so I always think about what is it that I would want for my own children, and how would I want an educator to approach the wellness of my own kids. And so I think the biggest thing is knowing the kids, knowing who they are, seeing them. I'm really big on each and every adult seeing, hearing, and valuing each and every child, and really understanding who they are as humans. So I think that's ultimately at the core of anything we do. In fact, last night we had a board study session where we were talking about college, career, and life readiness and preparedness. And the conversation really started to go towards this really, I think, very powerful idea that I don't often hear school districts and especially school boards talking about, which is we actually, for us to really prepare students to be successful in life, we have to take some of the pressure off of them. And part of that is we have to ask them, what is it that you want? So I think, again, just that idea of really knowing and valuing each and every child. I think the other thing about wellness that I'm really trying to create the conditions for in my district are students having places and spaces where when things aren't actually going well for them, or when they need a checkout time, or they need that person to go find and feel connected to, that there's a space and a place that they know about in the school, whether it is the trusted adult or an actual room. So in our schools, what we've developed is we call it the S3 space, which is basically our wellness center, and it's staffed with a mental health and wellness specialist and somebody who's trained in restorative practices. And it's a space where I've literally gone in the high school and I've seen giant, football players sitting around a table, like making beaded bracelets. It's just a place where they can just say, you know what, I need a timeout. And they know they can go there and get that support. And I would think the third thing I think that's really important. And I think, we use a lot of buzzwords in education, social emotional learning. But ultimately at the core, we have to support our kids to build resiliency, self-awareness, self-advocacy. And when they have those skills, they can always fall back on them. Things are going to get hard. And my own, again, I go back to my own experience with my own kids. Both of my sons have struggled with mental health. And what has really, I think, helped them get back to center is that they had some kind of a grounding force at the beginning when they were little that helped them to understand how to advocate for themselves, how to ask for help, and also how to know when they weren't well. And so I think those are some things that I've been really thinking about in our district and trying to create spaces for and professional development for.
Well, that's what I was going to say. And you know what? It's so fascinating just listening to you. It's captivating to me because I always approached the work as a dad first. I have identical twin girls. And it was fascinating to me because they look the same, yet personality wise, they were very different and they needed different things.
Totally.
And even today, those little girls are 30 now and married and starting their own families. And the other thing was, I hope they don't listen to this because I don't want to embarrass them. But I knew I didn't have a couple of products in my hands, right? And so my wife and I our goal was to raise kind, empathetic, caring human beings. And I'm happy to say I think that we have succeeded in that. And they told me after I drug them to all kinds of stuff as a middle school principal and a high school principal that, Dad, we're never going to go into education. Today, one of them's a kindergarten teacher and the other one's a high school counselor.
Oh, I love
and
that.
So it's just, a very proud dad moment. And, it's interesting. My wife is a big family. So they were raised with lots of cousins. And some of the parents, there was this competitiveness, which AP or advanced placement classes are your kids taking? And, what are you guys doing? And what clubs and activities are you in, all the sports and all the stuff, right? That we like to categorize and compare, as parents. And, one of the things I would often tell parents in my school district setting was, look, know your kid, listen to them, and each one of your children needs something unique, and advocate for them. And like you said, teach them to find their own voice and be able to advocate for themselves. And I think that's part of the journey of this idea of student agency is we've got to provide the professional development to the adults in the system so that they can then feel comfortable with some social emotional learning lessons for kids. How have you kind of created that safe space for the adults in the system to be willing to step out into something that's a little different than just the core academic instruction?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I don't think I've solved that yet. I will say, I think from my experience, adults who work in school systems really are doing it because it is actually, sort of their calling. I don't know many educators who are doing it for the paycheck. We know that, right? And I think for the most part, they're there because they absolutely love and adore children. And they themselves maybe didn't have the best experiences in school, or maybe they had an incredible experience in school and they want to replicate that. And so I think to tap into that, again, there's a lot of buzzwords. I've even read articles recently like, oh, stop talking about your why. That's so old fashioned, whatever. But the reality is you're there because of a why. You have a reason and you want to do what's best for kids. And I think tapping into that is the first part of any kind of good professional development. One thing that we are trying in our district right now is to do more teacher-led professional development and having teachers share their best practices with each other. We have, teachers who are really, I'll say one thing that I think has really shifted, and I'm sure you've heard this probably from other superintendents recently, but ever since the pandemic, what I'm noticing is more and more of our little people coming to school dysregulated. And we're seeing more and more behaviors that honestly our adults don't know how to support, and they maybe are mimicking kind of maybe autistic like behaviors or some other kind of neurodivergent behaviors, and the adults are like, I need help. So tapping into that too is great. And I also think that we haven't figured it out, we haven't solved it, but what I think the goal and the centering in that we keep going back to is we know that students need to feel a sense of safety, wellness, and belonging to be able to access learning. You can't, and we know that from the brain. If the brain is feeling hijacked, if the amygdala is feeling hijacked and you're in that fight, flight, or freeze or fawn mode, you're not going to be learning. And so, again, at the core, what we're working really hard with our teachers to do, and they do, I think, a very phenomenal job of doing, is creating that safe container for kids to come into and feel connected. The social emotional learning pieces of it, and like the lessons that we use and all of those things, I think, our teachers, some teachers are using things that work really well for them. And that's where we're kind of tapping back into, okay, well, what are you doing? How are you making things work? Giving people time and space to have those conversations at professional development time, even just like loose conversations like, hey, I have a child, almost like a case study. I have a child that I can't figure it out. I need some support. What would you do? And giving people that time and space more authentically, I think is what we're trying to do now. And I also think, there are programs out there that work really, really well for some teachers and not for all teachers. And so we're also trying to kind of like what you were saying about students need agency. One thing I also know to be true is that teachers need some agency, and they need to feel that ability to try things and do things. And they need a collective space, that whole idea of collective efficacy. They need to come together and do it together and know that they can solve that problem together.
Yeah, it's that sharing of best practices. And it's kind of goes back to an old adage that I think about, which is those closest to the work should be leading and guiding the work. Yeah. And oftentimes I think teachers feel like they just don't really have a seat at the table. Yes. To determine their own professional destiny and to be able to make those instructional decisions, and those assessment decisions. It's a different time, and I want to kind of just reflect back on the piece that you talked about. We were experiencing the same thing in my school district, where we had 4-year-old students coming in a dysregulated state that we had never seen. And we were completely underprepared to work with students in a way that they needed us. And so I think as time goes on, we're getting better and better through these kind of case study practices and bringing in some real professionals. Yeah. And I have to say, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to just take a guess and say, kudos to your Board of Education for supporting those wellness spaces and supporting, and taking the fiscal perspective of, bringing in those experts to work with students. So that they can become the best version of themselves. And you probably see this, and we would see it. It's kind of the earlier we can intervene for students, the better the outcomes are. And oftentimes, kids, if they enter at 4 or 5 years old, sometimes by the time they're in mid-elementary school, they've got this thing figured out and they're flying along, which is, true. What we all want. So I love that. I want to take just a moment. I was looking at I was actually struck by your school district's mission statement. And I want to take just a moment to read it aloud because I think it's that good. Albany Unified School District provides an excellent public education that empowers every student to achieve their fullest potential. We honor the unique ways students learn and are committed to creating inclusive, supportive, and collaborative learning environments. By valuing individual strengths, celebrating differences, and fostering critical thinking, we ensure that every student is prepared to contribute to a just and joyful world as they thrive as productive members of society. I just think that there's beauty in that.
Thank you. I agree.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, you know what struck me, I think the most, I mean, some of the earlier things are really powerful, but it's that last line: contribute to a just and joyful world and thrive as productive members of society, because it's a little aspirational, which I
Very.
love, which I love,
Yeah.
because wouldn't it be a beautiful thing if we were a just and joyful world? Talk to me about this a little bit.
Yeah. Well, again, I think so. When I came to the school district, the mission was slightly different. It was a great mission. But it was slightly different, and worked really hard with the board to really think about, and kind of, again, tapping back into, what do you want for your own kid, and what do you want them to be prepared for, and how are we as an educational agency or a system helping to bring kids to the thing that we would want for our own kids, and what is it that we would want for our own kids. We're actually currently in the process of going through creating a portrait of a graduate. And so that's even a kind of getting more and more, like, we're actually really trying to get everybody's feedback on that. But at the core, the mission, the board kind of sets the mission and the vision of the district with the support of the superintendent. And so we really had some kind of hard conversations about the mission statement that we had and what we wanted to shift in it. And there was a lot of talk about that last line, because it is very aspirational. And ultimately, I think what we came down to is, and the conversation I think that was so powerful, was when students enter into school as littles, pre-K, TK. And actually, I was in my pre-K program this morning watching students. The thing you see is that they are joyful. And for us to be able to harness that and help continue to make that what they are, that will contribute to a joyful world. I think when we start to take joy out of learning, that's when we actually start to see, more and more of the issues that we're seeing, not only in our schools, but also across society. And so I think for us, we really wanted to make sure that we were holding on to that joy, that spark that kids come in with, that they don't leave as seniors with that spark gone. And I will say too, I have to say, today was a beautiful day, because I got to see both ends of the spectrum. I got to see the joy of the tiny little ones. And then we had, this week is Diversity Week for our high school. And today's, every day there's something that they do in relationship to it. Today was the big assembly where they basically, kids just perform. And they perform dances and songs, and there was martial arts today. And that joy was in that space today. The joy, the laughter, the pride, the connection, the community was in that space. And so, again, I think when you really are intentional about that, and you're creating spaces that are intentional, that's when you actually can see that come to life. And so I think it has to sit in your mission, that's part of it. Productive members of society. We really want our kids to be, we say we want them to be critical thinkers. Well, why? Why do we want that? What are we trying to get to? We want kids to, again, have agency, be adults with agency. How do you do that? You have to really, you have to see it. You have to imagine it. I'm really about imagining, or going to the imaginal space, or, there's talk about, I'm a big fan of Dr. Bettina Love, and she talks a lot about freedom dreaming, and there are other people that talk about that. But I think when you do that, when you open up that space, that's when you get, you manifest it. And so that's why I love that mission statement, because I think we are really trying to continue to manifest that for our kids.
And it's so true. I mean, it's interesting. My first teaching assignment was teaching first grade. And I thought, oh my God, I mean, I'm lucky I didn't get canned. But I will say this, there's something about being around first graders or kindergartners that you've selected exactly the right word. They are joyful learners. They're curious. They want to learn things. They want to get along. They want to, they want to be there. They're super excited about school.
Yeah.
And then Sir Ken Robinson, if you listen to his TED Talk, he said, well, we kind of systematically beat that curiosity and creativity out of them by the time they're, matriculating on to high school. And so I think hanging on to that. But what's interesting is somehow, and one of my loves of the superintendency was presiding over high school graduation ceremonies. I would always tell the kids, I'll be the old guy up on stage in tears, because it just, somehow we pull it together and the kids are experiencing this rite of passage. Yeah. And they're joyful about it. Some of them are a little worried, but for the most part, they're hopeful. They're looking forward. It's a big day, and it's a big celebration for them and their families. And I think that's like super, super powerful. We're going to pause right here for a quick 30-second break for a message from our producer, SchoolBeat, which is the only SEL platform both educators and students truly love, with low-lift, Netflix-style choose-your-own-adventure lessons featuring real kids navigating real life challenges, daily wellness check-ins, and real-time insight into what students really feel. SchoolBeat is where every heart has a voice and every voice has a beat. Well, welcome back. Today's guest is Sarah Stone, Superintendent of the Albany School District here in California, Northern California. And Sarah, I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk about what are the things that you do to fill your cup? Where do you reach out for inspiration? What are your go-to things? And what are some of those habits or routines that you rely on when the going gets tough?
Such a good question. And I will start by saying I'm really good at helping other people think about this for themselves, and a little worse at doing it for myself. And I think that that's always been, I'll always ask that question. What are you doing for yourself? How are you taking care of yourself? What are you going to do? And then I work until midnight and fall asleep and wake up at 4.
I know. People would ask me about work-life balance, and I'm like, what work-life balance? Although I did hear recently something that I might be able to grab a hold of, which was I'm striving for work-life harmony. And I thought, I love that. Maybe I could do that.
Yeah. Harmony I can do. But I would say one of the interesting things that I have realized about myself, and I think this goes back again to my theme around children knowing themselves and people knowing them. I think everyone's finds, and I'm very fascinated by the brain, and I'm very fascinated by the way that your brain works and what kind of human you are. Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Like, what fills your bucket? And I'm the kind of person that if you say, okay, I want you to meditate, that will stress me out. I can't sit there in silence. That is not going to work for me. That's just the way my brain works. It does not work. What does work for me, though, is going outside and breathing and seeing nature. I have a beautiful backyard that I have cultivated to be my happy place. And I spend a lot of time outside. I do work outside when I'm home. I'm not going to pretend like I don't work when I'm at home. I do. But I'm doing it from a place that brings me a lot of calm and peace and joy. I love looking at birds. I love looking at butterflies. I have animals in my house. I have a beautiful little pug puppy that we call her Joy because she is hilarious. And so spending time in nature is really important to me. I exercise. I do all the good things for myself and my body. And I would say that the other thing that really fills my bucket, and the thing that that I realized about myself is I'm definitely an extroverted introvert. And so the way I really recharge is by getting real quiet by myself in my room and watching stupid television. I watch the dumber, the better, to be quite honest. But I also need my family and my humans around me. Spending time with my husband. I have two sons. I have a 24-year-old and a 17-year-old. And while they are not exactly wanting to spend a lot of time with mom anymore, when they do want to spend time with me, I make time. I stop and I make the time, because I think for me, just having them, even just 10 minutes of a conversation with one of them, I think really fills my bucket. And then at work, what I've realized is I do need to model more for my team how I want them to create that. I love that harmony between work and life. And so the way I lead meetings and the way I spend time with people is we really do start with getting to know each other as humans and spending time. And what I realized by doing that is that I can lean on people in a particular kind of way that if you don't know people as well and you don't know each other's stories, you can't do. So I think getting to know people is for me another way that I think it fills my bucket, and I think it also creates a space where when I really need support, I can find it, I can seek it.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of at work, kind of, sitting around that cabinet table and having those discussions where, that creative abrasion, that difference of perspective. And you probably run it just like I did, which is once you're at that table, yeah, we're all responsible for certain pieces of the organization, but we're all trying to solve the challenge together.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the budget person can chime in with the best ideas, and the HR person can chime in with the best ideas. And I loved that perspective. And frankly, I got to a point where I was not running the meeting myself, because I really wanted to be more concerned with the conversation at hand and not have to be worrying about taking notes or paying attention to, what direction the meeting was going and time constraints and all those kinds of things. It was better for me to just be a real active listener and participant in the conversation. And that worked well for me. Everybody, has different perspective and different ways of doing the business. But I do think that when you get to know people and you get to know their backgrounds, and, when you can, like, I'll just speak for myself, I still carry the trauma of the little boy, Mikey McCormick, with me as an adult. Yeah. And I've learned how to, deal with or hide or, process through that. Now that I'm in my, late 50s, but particularly in stressful times, I think that there's a little piece of us where we all revert back to those things that we carry with us. And so I think to have a really good functioning team, we have to get into some of that. People might disagree, but my experience was we have to get in touch with some of those things that make us who we are as adults and guide our, guide why we got into the business in the first place. And what, I used to say to people like, be that teacher that you needed as a kid and didn't get, so I think you're spot. I mean, not to get too therapeutic about the whole thing, but I do think that, the people that got into trouble as leaders were the ones that were never comfortable walking in their own shoes. And I think that's a piece of this leadership, particularly at the superintendent level, where you're just kind of under constant attack. It's that whole adage of know thyself. You really have to know yourself and be comfortable with yourself. And I love the fact that you enjoy the outdoors and find the tranquility in nature, because you give of yourself all day long, and think about those hundreds of interactions and the decisions that you're making. And to be able to have that space to come home to, I think that's really a beautiful thing. Sarah, what are you grateful for?
I am ever so deeply grateful for my family. I think, I say this to my husband often. If I did not have him in my life, I couldn't do what I do. He takes care of me. He does. He cooks for me. I don't cook. And he supports me. And, I've known my husband actually since I was 5 years old. So, I can't, he's my best friend. So family, my husband, my kids. And I think, for me, I'm also always, when you have your health, you have everything. And I think often, in my younger years, I took it for granted that I was healthy, or I took it for granted that people around me were healthy. But every single day that I feel good and I wake up and I'm, ready to go to work and do the hard things, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I'm here. And I think, at the really core end of the day, I'm so grateful for our students. I am absolutely amazed by our kids every single day. Today was again a perfect example. I want to tell this one story because I think it just personifies exactly why I do what I do. So at our high school, again, we do this diversity week every year, and there's this beautiful, kids are coming out and they're doing all these great things. There's one student, and this is my second year seeing this, and he did it again today. One student in a high school filled with over, 1,100 people, probably more like 1,300 people in the room. One student in the center of the gym doing this incredible dance from his culture with joy and brightness and happiness and like sharing who he is. And every single person in that room is clapping and cheering and stomping. That's what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for when we can create a space and we can see students for who they really are and give them that love and support. So students just amaze me. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the kids.
I love that. It's not silly to say that. I want to affirm that. People would often ask me like, aren't you worried about the future? And I would say, absolutely not. Because the kids that are coming through the system right now are incredible human beings with a level of social consciousness that I have not seen previously. And, having been in the game for, over 3 decades, there's some really bright kids that I feel like are going to do a better job solving some of the world's most intractable challenges than, frankly, my generation has done. And so I'm just super, super hopeful for the future. We've got some incredible human beings in our systems, and they will leave our systems and do fantastic things. Sarah, it's been a delight spending time with you today. Thanks so much for being a guest on the Superintendent Hot Seat. Everybody, Sarah Stone, Superintendent of Albany School District. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you. It's great.